So I will call to order our work session this evening for the Canby City Council. We will be discussing and getting an update on the Canby Comprehensive Plan and Urban Growth Boundary from our planning team and the consultant. So I will turn it over to you both.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. This is an update again on the Comprehensive Plan and Transportation System Plan and Urban Growth Boundary process. I'm just going to speak for a few moments here, just as a macro framework. This is intended to give the Council an understanding of where we're going, where we've been, where we're going, and the sequencing of those processes. It's a long journey to get to urban growth boundary expansion, and there's many steps involved with that process. There's also elements in the comprehensive plan and transportation system plan that are more near term, but still are important. And just so that the constituency that the council receives input from, that you're aware of what's happening as we move forward, and we're starting to go into the process of engaging the community in a much more robust fashion. We've been engaging the community, but in a fashion where those property owners outside of the current city limits are being notified of our process. We're requesting their input in this process, and we're requesting the community's input in the process more broadly as well. We've had one summit meeting, and we're having our second one on November 14th. Steve will cover that tonight. And we're really hoping for a good turnout on that as ambassadors for the process. We're also hoping that you continue to spread the word, and thank you for your spreading the word about this. It's very important that the community as a whole come together on this, and we get input from all people in the community that is represented here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Faust with 3J Consulting. Steve is leading our comprehensive plan and transportation system and urban growth boundary process, and he will bring us through a number of slides. And please feel free to comment during this process as Steve goes through it. There's quite a bit of information here. If there's a need to go back through more information and future work sessions, we will absolutely gladly do that to bring you up to speed. I was really pleased that we put the November 1st. I didn't realize everything was going to stack up exactly like it was going to when we assigned this date, but the timing is really good because we're right at the very beginning of entering into a much more deep dive on the conversation here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Mayor Hodson and councilors for having us here tonight. I'll just reiterate, as Don mentioned, there's a lot of information tonight, and this is really your first kind of bite at it. So don't think that this is it. We'll be coming back to you multiple times over the next few years. And as Don said, please jump in at any time. We're going to start kind of big picture and then funnel down a little bit to some of the tasks that we're working on right now. Excuse me. How do I do this?
Right here. Here we go. Gotcha.
Okay, so I'll start with a project overview of the comprehensive plan, TSP, and UGB expansion, and then kind of zoom out a little bit and what we're calling planning for growth, which Don mentioned, is a look at the process to get from now until when you might see new development happening on the ground in an urban growth boundary expansion. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the steps we're doing right now, which is visioning and scenario planning, and then finally some immediate next steps, most of which we've already talked about this evening, but we'll reiterate some key dates for you. So in terms of our project overview, as you know, we have three major components of the current project. That is the transportation system plan update, the comprehensive plan update, and the urban growth boundary expansion. The TSP and the comp plan processes are well underway. We started in January 2023, I believe, and we're just about through the visioning process for the comprehensive plan. And we're just getting started on the urban growth boundary expansion. As Don mentioned, we had our first summit, and our second one is on November 14th. We have a project advisory committee that's met 3 times thus far. We will continue to do briefings with you and with Planning Commission. And we will have a technical advisory committee that's primarily focused on the TSP, but also we will be checking in with some of our regulators regarding the land use side of things as well. And that's folks like DLCD, the Clackamas County, and potentially some other state departments. We anticipate that these 3 components of our project will start the adoption process in the fall of 2024 and hope to be done with the comprehensive plan and the TSP by the end of 2024. That's our goal for the UGB expansion as well on the city side, but just knowing how these things go sometimes, we are anticipating, or at least being prepared, that it might go into winter and spring of 2025. Here's some key dates to that extent. So I know that you're aware of the housing needs analysis and the housing production strategy. Those are on track to be adopted by May of 2024. Don is working with Dowell on land efficiency measures, and that also we're looking to be done by June 2024. As I mentioned, the comprehensive plan and the TSP, we expect to wrap up by the end of 2024, with UGB expansion by June of 2025, hopefully not that long. And in terms of the UGB expansion, once the city adopts that UGB amendment, it then has to be approved by the county and then by the state. So that might take another 6 months or so. So what is this? Now we're going to zoom out a bit, as I mentioned, and look at beyond just the current project and what it takes to get all the way to development on the ground. So lots of steps here, and I'm going to walk through them one by one. The first is our EOA, which has been adopted, not yet acknowledged by the state, but it's been adopted by the city. So we're waiting there. And the housing needs analysis, which I think we're planning to go in April, potentially. And those 2 documents establish the land need for the city. The EOA documents the employment need, the H&A documents the residential need. Excuse me, so that is underway. Again, the comprehensive plan and the TSP are essentially establishing policies, a plan and policies for the land inside the current urban growth boundary. So again, we expect that to be done by the end of the year, or the end of 2024, I'm sorry. At the same time, I mentioned Don is working. Before you can expand your urban growth boundary outward, the state requires that you look inward to make sure that you are using the land you already have as efficiently as possible. And they look to the city to adopt what they call some land use efficiency measures. And that's what Don and Dowell are working on right now. So that can be things like changing zoning or changing some of the requirements within your current zones to potentially allow more density, other measures of that nature. And if you have questions about those, Don can answer those. And then once we do that, we'll be working on we'll continue our analysis of the urban growth boundary expansion study area. And I'll go in, that's one of the things I'll go into more detail in just a moment. But once we have our study area, there are these 4 UGB expansion factors, these goal 14 factors. I list them there. They are, does the land efficiently accommodate the need that's been established? Can you provide the public services and utilities needed to urbanize that land? We do what's called an ESEE analysis. That's environmental, social, economic, and energy assessment of the impacts of the various areas you might expand into. And then are these lands that might urbanize, will that be compatible with any adjacent farm and forest land? So that's essentially, once we establish our study area, that's the big analysis that we'll be doing starting late this year and early next year. Once you have your urban growth boundary expansion set and approved by the city and the county and the state, then we have to do a little planning for that area. eventually you need to have comprehensive plan. It needs to be addressed in the comprehensive plan and in your code. But along the way, some important, we do what's called concept planning, and kind of planning out where the land uses will go, what the road network's going to look like. Importantly, I've learned over the past few years, doing a natural resource inventory is very important. In particular, cities have to do a local wetland inventory, and the inventory itself doesn't take too long to do, although you have to do it during the correct time of year when the ground is wet. But it does take the Department of State Lands about a year to approve those local wetland inventories. So that's something when we get to this point, we're going to want to get started on right away. We also need to, the city will also need to update public facilities plans and come up with a plan for financing infrastructure to serve the expansion areas. So a lot of work goes into that concept plan that essentially is saying, yeah, here's the land uses, here's the roads, here's how we plan to pay for it to urbanize or to develop the UGB expansion area. I mentioned development and zoning code, but a lot beyond just that expansion area, the city is going to want to see if there are code updates to implement the new comprehensive plan, any code updates that are needed there. Also, I assume the city hasn't had the level of annexation that you're going to see after you expand the urban growth boundary. So taking another look at annexation code and policies to make sure that the process will run smoothly when you get to that point is something we'll want to do. And then eventually we get to, again, annexation and construction and development. Once those plans and codes are all in place, that process can begin. So maybe I'll pause there. That's the big picture look at the next. I mean, there's a reason we stop at January 1st, 2027, because we don't know exactly how long that's going to take. But any questions about that, sir?
My question I have is going back to what you said earlier about requiring a certain density within the city itself. What is that density that the state wants to have?
Good question, and I'll hand it to Don in a second, but it's not necessarily requiring a certain density. I think this is one of the things that the state is doing some rulemaking on right now because there is no clear bar that the city has to meet in terms of these efficiency measures. They just, at this point, the best I can say is that they're looking to see that the city has made a good faith effort to use the land within the current urban growth boundary efficiently. But again, there's no box we can check and say, yes, we accomplished this. It's a matter of doing the work that Don and Dal have been doing, being in communication with the state and trying to have an understanding that it is going to be sufficient to move forward with the UGB expansion.
And just to maybe boil us down a little further, without going into super technical detail, the housing needs analysis is a basis that's done based on buildable land inventory and using a methodology that primarily looks at what are the housing needs for this community over the next 20 years. And that's largely what the housing needs analysis is. And so to Steve's point, there's not exactly a formulaic density that the state's saying you have to achieve. It's more about, are you creating a diversified environment of housing types that meet your forecasted demographic need, which we know what that is. So that's part of that process. The efficiency measures, I just wanted to touch on those. The three that the city's focusing on right now are cottage developments, plan unit development updates, and also allowance for some residential that would be allowed on the south side of 99 that currently it's allowed, but the complexity of that process is fairly challenging. Those are the three that we're looking at. There very well could be some other items where some areas in the city that were looked at previously through other master planning processes are actually upzoned, but for the large part, I think it's going to really be focused on the efficiency measures dealing with code issues. And those efficiency measures are critical in the sense that without those and acceptance by Department of Land Conservation and Development, we cannot do an urban growth boundary expansion. That's the tie into those.
So it's kind of arbitrary. I mean, right now it's arbitrary. if they like it, they'll let you. If they don't, they won't.
It's actually not arbitrary in the sense that it's fairly quantitative in terms of its analysis, because there is a very specific formula for how are buildable lands looked at in terms of what's needed. And then we come back with the demographics with our consultants saying, this is what the needs are for the housing for the next 20 years in the city. So there is some subjectivity that, to Steve's point, in terms of not having exact guidelines, but I would say that when we get to the housing needs analysis, you're clearly as a body going to be the decision-making body on this. There'll be more information about that will help explain this. I think at this point, we could probably spend the entire night on housing needs analysis, and Steve has a bunch of slides to get through. But so I want to, absolutely answer your question, but just say
Well, I
more to
mean,
come.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to, I mean, and
Yeah.
you don't have to go into too much into detail tonight. I know it seems to be complicated, but I'm trying to think in my mind practical. Right now, in the older area of Canby, a lot of times it's quarter acre, sometimes even half acre lots. Are those going to have to be developed before an expansion is approved, or is it just a question of creating the zoning so they could be developed?
And the state is not forcing anyone to do anything on infill so there's assumptions, however, based on what percentages of those will convert. In our experience and pragmatically, we don't think a large percentage of smaller lots under 1 acre are going to convert. So they're not really a huge part of the equation. We're probably talking about acreages between 5 and 5+ acres or 10+ acre lots that would be developed over time. This is not about, and this is the challenge here, because the state has also got other objectives and agendas, and the governor has agendas, and we need to push those aside because they are separate from what we're doing here. But there are things that the state has adopted which allows for more densification. Currently, that's state law, allows for like a duplex on a single family lot. That's already state law. But we just haven't seen that realized in the community. I think most communities have not seen that, but the state is still working on other housing elements. They're not directly related to the work we're doing. So I think that's the problem, I think, is you get information in the media and it's somewhat complicated and confusing.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, Don, just a quick question, follow up on that. With the development of zoning code updates, it's slated for, towards the end of 24, beginning of 25. My question is would we want to move that forward a little bit so we can start developing those code updates so that we're not, doing infill on one code and then in the future doing it on another code?
A great point. And Steve and I were just talking about that before the work session tonight. Clearly, there's going to be items that we want to parallel. For example, we don't really have comprehensive plan park designations in our comp plan. We have the parks master plan, but we don't have policies necessarily that are adopted as part of our comp plan, nor do we have a zoning provisions for public facilities like parks. That clearly is one that's targeted. We clearly need to have a public facility, in my opinion, designation that's a zoning that we move forward with that. Out of our next steps here, we're going to get into policy direction for the comprehensive plan, which will touch on a number of items: land use, housing, employment, et cetera. Those policies will direct us in terms of then being able to look at codes that do need to be updated. What's unclear at this point to us is whether or not, let's say, for example, on employment, if there was an expansion of the boundary, would the same zoning designations be present, or would there be a new zoning designation? And that's part of this discussion. We're not quite there yet, but to your point, I think I'd like to parallel those processes, but we first need to know what the policies are.
Okay. So now we're going to shift to talking specifically about the urban growth boundary expansion, because we want to give you an idea of what direction we're headed in. So urban growth boundary expansions are governed by statewide planning goal 14. As I mentioned earlier, we established the land need in the HNA and the EOA. That work is nearly complete. Again, the EOA adopted and the HNA will be coming before you in the spring. We talked about the efficiency measures. Those are underway. And then the next step is to create the preliminary and then the final study area. So, well, I'll get to that point specifically in just a moment. And then once we have our final study area, there's three things we do. We prioritize the land. There's a state classification system with the top category, the top priority being urban reserves, of which Canby has none, and exception lands, which there are some, which is urban level development outside the urban growth boundary. And then eventually you get into looking at soil classifications. The priority is for lower value soils, lands with lower value soils before you go to your high value farmland. And then we look at suitability criteria. So to the extent that the economic opportunities analysis identified specific industries that have specific site needs, we can focus in on those lands. And then finally, those four factors that I mentioned earlier, that we will be looking at the various possible directions the expansion could go in and comparing them to each other relative to those four factors. So again, to establish the preliminary study area, we look at all land designated as urban reserve, which Canby has none, and then all lands within 1 mile of the current urban growth boundary. So when we draw a line around 1 mile from the current urban growth boundary, the red line is what you get. Notably, you can see, so the lands that are brown, those are undesignated. They're not urban reserve, they're not rural reserve, they are undesignated. The lands that are kind of greenish, those are rural reserves, and those are not available for urban growth boundary expansion. So the areas that are highlighted in brown are really, that's really the study area we're talking about. Here's a little bit more of a zoom in to those parcels in particular. To get to our final study area, the city can exclude some lands. So one, lands that are impracticable to provide necessary public facilities and services. That could be to the extent that some of the undesignated lands, I don't think they do, but if they were to be on the other side of a river, just other geographic barriers to serving them with public facilities and services. Areas that are subject to significant development hazards. And by the way, this is where we are right now. This is the analysis that we're doing, my team's doing right now. Areas that consist of significant scenic, natural, or cultural recreation resources, and areas that are owned by the federal government and managed for rural uses. In the end, our final study area needs to include at least twice the amount of the land needed for the deficiency. Don, what's the employment demand? Do you remember what that number is? 450 around?
It's 430 acres. I thought you were actually asking for the number of employees, but 430, yeah, which I probably could guess what that is. But yes, 430 acres is the rough number, and about 8 acres of commercial.
Okay.
Yep.
And then we are in the process of refining the demand for residential, which we think could be, I don't know, 150 to 100, somewhere in there. So we might be looking at around 550 acres, which means that our study area would need to be about 1,100 acres. And again, this is preliminary, but we have some acreages here I thought you would be interested in seeing, just to get an idea of the total acreage of the possible expansion areas relative to that demand for 550 acres. As mentioned earlier, there are a number of environmental constraints on some of these lands, including floodplain. We have the discretion to, and I think we haven't decided this yet, we might leave some of those floodplain areas in our study area for now, just for the studies purposes, but we can always remove those later. But you can see that for each of those areas, you can see the number of constrained acres. So what you're left with, for example, in the south, 159 total acres, constrained 64. So that is really about 95 buildable acres for that. And we could do the same math all around. But I think when we look at it in total, we will have about what we need in terms of twice the amount of land, as is the demand.
And just to be clear, so it's a mapping exercise, and so just because it's colored on this map doesn't mean that that property would be brought into Steve's point. A lot less of that property, if in fact the entire acreage for employment and the entire acreage for residential would be a significantly lessened map that would show a smaller area than what's shown here. You look at the sea of green in the northwest quadrant of the city, for example, and that's 966 acres. And if we need between 50 and 100, and let's say that area was residential, that would be a much smaller piece of that area up there. And I'm just throwing that out there. None of this has been decided. And this is why we're having the beginnings of this on November 14th with the community summit to start to tease out the scenario planning for the city. But there's a lot, these are not really necessarily balanced. This is all predetermined in terms of what was negotiated in the past, but this is really what the city has to play with. And so this would be for this 20-year plan, and then the next 20-year plan beyond that, there would be another reassessment for acreage that was not taken in. Yes.
Don, so looking at just as an example, so East A, the pink area on the right, when we talk about 43 acres that are constrained, do we know approximately what part of that stretch is the constrained area? Steve?
I don't have the map with me, but we have mapped out the environmental constraints, so we will know, yes.
Thank you. Councilor Stearns?
Oh, I would kind of just what you were talking about. When you say constrained, it means that for some reason it's been blocked off from possible development. Is that what constrained means?
Yeah, some of the things I mentioned here, either there's significant development hazards. I think in particular, we're talking a lot about floodplain.
Okay, so floodplain is.
I can't remember, it
what-
could be slopes, steep slopes, especially steep slopes for residential is 25%, but for industrial, it's only 10%. So slopes might play a factor in terms of those industrial lands.
Okay.
But things of that
I was
nature.
just wondering what was constraining it. I mean, so basically it's flood and that's okay.
I think it's water primarily. And one of the reasons that I think it's helpful to keep the floodplain areas in our study areas, because while you don't want to develop there, there might be natural type parks that you want to locate on some of those lands to protect or preserve or give access potentially. So.
Yes, Councilor Davis?
Going back a little bit, when you're talking about UGB and us identifying the UGB, what happens to areas where there's an area that is in kind of no man's land, but wants to be developed, but isn't being taken, like they come to us and say, hey, would you consider, Canby, would you consider this area for future development, i.e. going out, whether it's out towards the airport, you know, or some areas like that, because it's not in a service area. It's not in a service area of Aurora. It's not in the service area of Wilsonville. It's kind of out there, but that's potential commercial property. How are those dealt with?
Don, you know the geography better than I do.
Globally, for our 20-year review of what we're doing right now, those properties you're mentioning will not be part of any consideration. However, as everything evolves over time, and in 2030, there probably will be another reevaluation of some of these boundaries. Again, that's not what we're dealing with right now, because we're dealing with 2023 in this process that we're moving forward with, but there could be additional consideration. And I would not say that necessarily that those would be part of Canby, but Aurora and Hubbard, those areas will be relooked at. And some of this is driven by federal transportation and analysis for roads and also population that Metro is looking at. And we're way outside of Metro. We're not going to be part of Metro. We have rivers and wetlands that separate us, and that's going to continue to be the situation here in Canby. We're far enough away from that. But some of those outliers that you're talking about will have to be reconsidered in the future, and that's part of separate processes.
Is a city allowed to have separate sections of itself? Like, would we be able to, city is completely surrounded by, the area we're talking about in the city currently is completely surrounded by rural reserve. Are we able to designate an area that is not contiguous to the city boundary as part of the city of Canby? Or does it have to be all connected in some way, by strip of property or whatever?
And I'm going to let Steve answer part, but essentially we need to have adjacent or abutting property. You cannot leapfrog and create, that's a fundamental planning principle and pretty much all planning. And so it has to be adjacent. And also this has to do with, logical extension of utilities, because you don't want to also have a lot of expense as a jurisdiction with that. The other part is what we're allowed to really only address is undesignated. That is the rules of the game, essentially. We cannot look at rural reserves.
Yeah.
They're locked in for another 38 years before that will be reassessed.
Well, I assumed that, but things are crazy. So it's possible that it's
And
like,
I-
oh yeah, you can just do whatever.
In Oregon, I don't think
Oh, I
anything.
don't even have my button pushed, I'm sorry.
I think Oregon on land use is not going to change. I mean,
Okay.
my personal opinion, is radicals, everything is out there. I don't think that will be one of those items that will change.
I like that, okay.
So just for my education, which, I'm sorry if I have to educate me a little better. Rural reserve is something that somebody in the state said, no touch for 30 years. And how long is that renewed?
Well, it was originally 50 years, right?
50 years. So this was established, and there's people in the room who were part of this process for Canby. But yes, your urban growth boundary is 20 years, and rural or urban reserves go out 50 years. It was established around 2012. Metro and all 3 counties participated in the process. And in the end, it was actually the legislature that came in and set the boundary. People know it as the grand bargain. Whether the people think it's a bargain or not is another story.
So only the legislature could, in theory,
Yeah.
change that. Okay.
And that is correct. And I mean, that would be a quantum lift given everything else that the legislature is dealing with. I don't think that's a targeted area. I'm just wanting to throw that out there.
Very remote.
Did you call it the grand compromise? What was
Grand
it?
bargain.
The grand bargain, I'm gonna have to write
You
that
need to
down.
look it up because
It was called that, yeah.
I think the grand bargain was most beneficial for Washington County, if I remember correctly, so.
I was one of those people that were part of that whole fight, so I remember some of it.
I plead the fifth.
I was just getting started. President
Okay.
Greenhorn.
So in all that I've been talking about, a lot of different types of studies and analysis, didn't talk much about community members and kind of determining, excuse me, your own fate. So I just want to talk a little bit about how the community gets involved in this process and some of the things we have planned. And that's the vision and scenario planning. So we have, excuse me, we brought a draft vision based on all the outreach we've been doing since January to the Project Advisory Committee just a few weeks ago, and had a great conversation, and I have not incorporated comments from that meeting into this vision statement yet, but we will be doing that prior to the November 14th public meeting, and we'll give everyone at that public meeting a chance to weigh in. But I'm just going to walk through the elements of the vision really quickly. I'm not going to read them in full. But in 2043, Canby has housing for all. Canby is a supportive and welcoming community, has a diverse and prosperous economy, has resilient public infrastructure, and a network of connected green spaces. If in your review of the materials we provided you, you have some thoughts on those, feel free to give them to Don. But again, we got great comments from the PAC. I think overall they were pretty happy with it. They gave some really good suggestions on a few word or meaning changes or a few elements that were missing, but I think it's in pretty good shape, and I look forward to hearing from the community on November 14th. The other exciting thing that we're going to be doing on November 14th is a mapping exercise. And this is asking folks to look both within the current urban growth boundary as well as into these preliminary study areas and think about how the city should grow inside and outside over time. So each table will have a really large map Again, showing the urban growth boundary in some of those study areas. They'll get game pieces or stickers that says chips here that represent different development types, whether that's single-family residential or multifamily residential, parks, commercial, industrial, and each group is essentially going to create their future for the city of Canby. We take all the maps, so hopefully we have enough people where we have at least 8 different maps. We digitize those and create different scenarios through a software called Envision Tomorrow. And what we'll be able to do then is compare those 3 scenarios according to a number of factors. Things like trips, how many trips, and therefore how much, greenhouse gas emissions, things related to the economy and what kind of economic benefit we can expect to get, things related to health in terms of walkable communities and people having bike and walking options. So there's a whole list of factors that are built into the software that we'll come back out at our next summit, which will probably be in maybe February or March of next year, and share these different scenarios with the community and with you all. And it's usually not an option of picking A, B, or C, but saying what do we like from these different scenarios, and that moves us towards a preferred scenario, which could then have impacts on both the direction we go with our urban growth boundary expansion, as well as maybe updates to the city's comprehensive map and how different land uses are distributed within the current city. Questions there?
More just a quick comment. When you talk about public facilities, it's more than just parks and things like that. I think we need to take into account public safety too, police and fire, so that those aren't forgotten along the way, because many times you go out and you try to find, when you start growing like that, a satellite police station or another fire station or a training facility or something like that. It's after the fact that public safety is looking for some of those things.
Thank you for that. And when we do our urban growth boundary this exercise with the community is a little more about visioning and desires, but when we do the technical analysis, that second of those 4 factors is the ability to serve with public services and utilities, and we'll definitely be studying and working with fire and police to look at feasibility from their standpoint and their ability to serve those areas.
Since we're on the topic of public lands, I think, or maybe this has already been done, but in regards to the school district and school growth in that front, I know there's a couple of different areas of land that have already been acquired by the school district, but just even knowing where those are at is part of this conversation. So, we can at least know where they're at to work around them and plan around that as well.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
And just on that point, Jamie Stickle she was instrumental in getting a couple board members from the school district on our PAC. So I think that's a great point. We're moving really strongly towards a more integration. They're updating their master plan as well. It's more, I think it's in a 10-year horizon versus a 20, but really critical on that path as well. And to Jim's point, police and fire, response times, those kinds of things are important, as Steve's talking about, as we get further into this, and what does that mean in terms of what that need is. So.
And excuse me, and I can mention on parks as well. When you see the housing needs analysis and in the urban growth boundary expansion study, we are looking at the city's standard for parks and what does that mean for land in an urban growth boundary expansion, specifically to parks. So I mentioned employment and housing, but I didn't mention parks. And I think based on the growth that we're anticipating, it's looking like about 60 acres of parks to go along with the employment and residential numbers that I mentioned previously.
That's
So
a
that's part.
perfect size for the athletic fields.
Yeah, you need to pick up on that.
We have
Soon
to
as
leave
number
some, we have to
60.
leave some over, Jim.
I'll say, and the one thing that we need to talk to the state about, to be clear about, is in our urban growth boundary expansion, if the parks allotment can only be based on anticipated growth, or if we can make up for, I think the city is a little behind in terms of parks per 1,000 residents currently, and can we ask for that as part of the expansion or not? So that's a question I haven't gotten answered yet. Okay, in terms of next steps, we mentioned these dates earlier. November 6th, we have invited by postcard all of the property owners in that study area that you saw earlier to come here for a listening session. We're going to have a few boards of some of the maps that I shared tonight. And we've also been preparing kind of a frequently asked questions document that hopefully answers a lot of people's questions about what does this mean and what part do I play in it? But I mean, really the whole point is to let people know, resolve any anxiety that people might have about it, hopefully. And also it's helpful to know if your property owners are supportive of being included in a potential urban growth boundary expansion. That's helpful information. November 14th, as I mentioned, is our second summit where we'll be doing that mapping exercise and running the draft vision by the community. And then on December 11th, we have, is it going to be a work session?
Yeah, that'll be a work session with the Planning Commission on housing needs. And that, again, there'll be a number of these that we're doing on work sessions. We're anticipating likely going to be one for council as well as we go into the new year.
And that will all be leading towards, as we mentioned, hopefully adopting the housing needs analysis and the housing production strategy in spring of 2024. We mentioned we sent out this postcard. Hopefully you got a chance to look at it, but I'm sure Don and Jamie have extras if you want to take a look at it. And that is the extent of our presentation for this evening, but we're of course happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Yes, Counselor Stearns.
A question, I think I received an email solicitation from somebody that said they didn't want to be part of the urban growth boundary. And my question really is that really even possible to have islands of non-urban growth within the urban growth boundary?
I would say it's, I mean, we've seen it. You might even have a pocket right now. It's not desirable. I think on the front end, in terms of the study area, our hands are really tied. And to the extent that people don't want to be included, I mean, so the study area is the study area. As we move forward, there may or may not be opportunities to remove certain sections. I went through some of those reasons earlier. You could remove certain properties from or based on your analysis, but typically we wouldn't remove a property just because someone says they don't want to be included.
And then it wouldn't be good to have holes in the boundary.
Exactly.
And just, I mean, the state has their own parameters around this item, and I do think there needs to be some sensitivity to property owner desires. I think that's important. So I think where there are opportunities, if that was a huge sticking point, are we still having a contiguous and adjacent boundary to the city? It's one thing to have a donut hole, which is not ideal. It's another thing to move around property and still have a contiguous boundary. So those have not been really addressed or looked at this point, and that's all part of this process that we're looking at. And I think, the other thing I think to keep in mind here is somebody could be brought into the urban growth boundary and never be annexed. That's completely up to the property owner. It's really an important point here in this discussion. It doesn't mean your taxes are going to go up. It means you have an opportunity to do something in the future. Growth is not always popular, and I think part of our lens here is, since we really haven't looked at this for like 39 years for this boundary, it's not surprising that we need to grow some more. And it's the next 20 years. And that's the other part of it. It's not only is it your choice, but this is really a 20-year plan. And people have a tendency to look more near term and say, well, it's going to happen in 5 years. Well, The reality is, if you look at other jurisdictions, it takes really a long time for that property to fully develop and come in and be annexed. But the city needs to look at that as a, jobs, housing balance, and all the other things that cities do in that process.
Yes, Councilor Patton.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole impetus behind this is to have essentially have 20 years worth of buildable lands in your urban growth boundary. Ours was last changed 30-some almost 40 years ago. And over that 40 years, there's still, how many acres that have not been annexed into the city that have the potential to? Is it like 18 or 4 or something like that?
I don't have exact numbers. I mean, there are some areas like down at Jarbo's restaurant, that area, which is called Special Area J in our comp plan now, that has not come in. That's probably one of the larger chunks that has not been brought in.
Yeah, so even in 30-some years, we haven't, all the land that was brought in back in that time still has not been. So, in 20, preferably in 20 years from now, not 39 years from now, people, then the whole process starts all over again, and there should be a certain amount of buildable land still in the boundary is the goal.
Other questions or comments? I'll just say thank you. I know that a number of that work committee is here in the room, and I know Jason and I are also on that committee, and so really do appreciate the work that you all are doing, and Don and your team. It's a lot. It's a lot to take on, and there are a lot more meetings to come up. So definitely, people, the community, you have input, you have thoughts, please come to the 14th meeting, and November 14th, 6 to whenever, at the Canby PD. So please mark your calendars and come give us your thoughts on this process. So, okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will end our work session for the time being. We're ahead of the curve, which is always good. So we will meet back here at 7 o'clock to begin our city council meeting.
Okay.
Jordan is ready. All right, we're gonna begin the meeting here in 5, 4. Good evening, Canby. Welcome to the November council meeting. If you please stand for invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Dear Heavenly Father, I just take a moment to, so many things going on in our community right now. I lift up our veterans as we get ready to celebrate Veterans Day here on the 11th. I say a prayer for the loss of life in the Middle East right now in Israel, and just ask that that come to resolution sooner than later. Please bless our community and the leaders in it to have wisdom and discernment in all things as we lead this city. In your name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we get into staff introductions, I have been asked by Councilor Bangs to address the council and the community. So, Mr. Bangs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and Council, Mr. Mayor has known for about 4 minutes I wanted to address you before the meeting started. I intend to resign my position as City Council effective almost immediately. I want to finish my comments first. This is a decision I did not take lightly, and because of the people that elected me, I feel an obligation to explain. As with many decisions like this, there are multiple reasons. My teaching job has gotten much more difficult. When I ran for council, I was not teaching an advanced placement class. I am now. I've been tired a couple of Thursdays after council meetings, and we haven't gone all that late, but I've been unprepared for an hour lecture sometimes. Secondarily, my wife is a second-year teacher and a grad student at PSU, she is in night classes on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays every week, and we meet on Wednesdays. There's also some political reasoning behind this. I've been subjected to an enormous amount of social media attacks since I first started to run 4 years ago. And for 4 years now, I, and really not me so much, but the Canby High School administration has worked tirelessly to defend me on these. I really applaud their professionalism. I don't mind if people say things that aren't true about me online. I'm not on social media. I never see that unless one of my friends gleefully shares it with me. Look what they're saying about you now. But it's trickling into my professional career. I have an enormous love and respect for the Canby School District. I've been there for more than 20 years. Our superintendent and our administration have bigger things to worry about than my role on city council. It shouldn't be like this, but it is. So for all of these reasons, I am resigning. And they're not singular. It's not because of this mainly. It's really a gestalt of reasoning. I want to say on my way out how much I appreciate the work that all of you do here on behalf of this community. I'm constantly struck by the professionalism and knowledge of the counselors. Even Councilor Stern, who's only been here for a few weeks, has already contributed, I think, to the council. I think all of you do. The work is important, and I want you to keep at it. I also want to applaud the professionalism of our city staff. I've made friends on this. The relationships I've made while serving on city council are the biggest takeaway and joy I've had while serving. I'm going to keep some of that with me. So with that, I am resigning. And when I say effective immediately, I'm going to get up and abandon you guys for the rest of this meeting. Thank you so much for your service. Councilor Stern. Backhand. Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. Brian. Pepe.
Well, Chris, we're gonna miss you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna miss you guys too, but I'm gonna still watch on TV and keep tabs on you. There's a lot of work I still hope that you guys get done and a lot of decisions that are weighty, and I trust you guys to do those well. I have here my iPad. Never once, excuse me, rubber band has lost its rubber band badge. And you need to describe to me what the cord looks like, because I can't figure out which cord it is. So I'll get that back. Eileen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, now on to the next item.
Thanks, Chris.
I'm sure I'll have comments here later as I kind of digest this this evening. So we'll move forward with staff introductions. Eileen, I think that is your wheelhouse tonight.
Yes, we have a new person here tonight.
We do have a new staff person to introduce tonight, and George, Chief Tro, is going to do this, the honors.
I'm going to do the honors, and I'll be close to the mic, so make Gordon happy.
Turn on your green light.
I don't have to turn, it's on, okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Super happy to be here tonight to introduce our new full-time code enforcement officer, Chris Ann Sapp, and I'm going to have her come up real quick. So just a little bit about Chris Ann. So she grew up in the Portland metro area. She left us for a while and was in the Seattle area for about 17 years. While there, she worked for the Seattle Police Department doing some code enforcement and parking enforcement for the last 6 years. She's excited to be part of the Canby Police Department and the Canby community. She has an adult son, a sweet little corgi, and in her free time, she enjoys reading, photography, and spending time with family. One warning I'm going to give you is she's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and has been training for the last 11 years. So don't mess with Chris
Oh,
Ann.
my.
She looks forward to getting to know everyone. I wanted to share a couple quotes that were around, that I heard around our office over the last month about Chris Ann. Just a few. What a great hire. I love her. She's such a good fit, and Chris Ann is awesome. Needless to say, we are thrilled to have her on staff for the city of Canby and doing full-time code enforcement. So welcome, Chris Ann.
Welcome.
Welcome
Chris,
aboard.
If you're interested in having coffee some morning, I have a list of pet peeves that Carrie has not had time to get to. So she's been too busy to worry about my list.
Well, you have my email.
All right, very good.
Perfect. Well, welcome aboard. We
Thank
really
you very
appreciate you joining the team. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, George. Appreciate it. Thank you. It's good to see you, Jose.
He's playing photog tonight.
Next on the agenda this evening is a proclamation regarding Small Business Saturday. The proclamation is declaring that the Saturday after Thanksgiving, this year, November 25th, 2023, as Small Business Saturday. Whereas the city of Canby celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community. Whereas according to the United States Small Business Administration, there are 32.5 million small businesses in the United States. Small businesses represent 99.7% of firms with paid employees. Small businesses are responsible for 62% of net new jobs created since 1995. And small businesses employ 46.4% of the employees in the private sector in the United States. Whereas 79% of consumers understand the importance of supporting the small businesses in their community on Small Business Saturday, 70% report the day makes them want to encourage others to shop small, independently owned retailers, and 66% report that the day makes them want to shop small all year long. Whereas 58% of shoppers reported they shopped online with a small business, and 54% reported they dined or ordered takeout from a small restaurant, bar, or cafe on Small Business Saturday in 2021. Whereas the city of Canby supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities, and through year-round efforts and during the Holiday Shop Local campaign. Whereas advocacy groups, as well as public and private organizations across the country, have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Hodson, of the Mayor of the City of Canby, do hereby proclaim November 25th, 2025 as Small Business Saturday, and urge the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. Given unto my hand this first day of November 2023 in the city of Canby. And I believe Jamie, Tyler have something they want to address the council on a couple of things. Smile for the camera.
Great, thank you.
All right. It's on green, we're good. Mayor, Council, thank you so much. My name is Tyler Neiser. I'm the Economic Development and Tourism Coordinator for the City of Canby. And really thank you so much for including the Small Business Saturday proclamation in tonight's City Council. It's very vital to our small businesses. And, you know, while some may think that it's just, you know, one day, every day is crucial and significant for our small businesses. And so we've, for years, the City of Canby has been partners with the American Express Neighborhood Champion. And so we're going to continue those efforts in conjunction with the Small Business Saturday, and continue those with our Shop Local Canby campaign, and that is in front of you. And so I just wanted to take a minute to explain what's going on. Many of you know the Shop Local Canby campaign, but I just wanted to prepare you for what's to come on November 25th. This is a Shop Local Canby card. We have on the back is 10 available punches, and you would get one punch for every $10 purchase you make. This could be at one business with 10 separate transactions of $10 or more, or it would be at a variety of 10 different businesses of 10 purchases or more. So there's a lot of different ways that you could fill up a card. You can also do as many cards as you can between the time of November 25th, which is the last Saturday in November, Small Business Saturday, and then January 4th, which is the first Thursday night market. Let's see here. Once you guys have those all filled, then you would fill out your information and then submit that into a Dropbox at all the participating businesses for Shop Local Canby. And so that's coming here November 25th. And we really look forward to rewarding residents and visitors to Canby of shopping local. I mean, COVID wasn't kind to many. It was especially not kind to our small businesses. And so we really want to bolster those efforts and make people aware of all the things that our small businesses have. There's such a variety of different gifts, for your stocking stuffers or whatever it may be, for whatever loved one you may have. There's always something you can find here in Canby. So, and now you get to get rewarded for doing it. So thank you so much. And remember to shop local and shop Canby. Do you have any questions?
Mr. Nizer, what items are going to be in the drawing for these
Thank you for
lovely
asking.
cards? 'Cause that's also important.
That is a very important item as well. So something that's really cool with this is there's a partnership with us and the businesses. And so this could be, every business that participates in the Shop Local Canby campaign also either contributes to a prize of some sort, or there's a gift card of $50. And so last year we had, over 40 businesses participate. We look forward to really, increasing that number. So there's going to be at least, 40 plus prizes available at the end of this drawing. And so there's really, there's a high incentive to participate and get as many cards filled out as you can.
And I apologize if I'm asking a question that you already addressed, but where can I get more cards if I fill up the 2 that you've already given me?
Yeah, so we will have them here at the city hall. All of the participating businesses will also have those. And so we'll be able to share with you later on as we get closer to November 25th where those locations are. And then, most businesses in downtown especially will have a Dropbox and additional cards available.
And where can we find the list of businesses that are involved?
You can find that list on our website, social media. Check Canby Business is our domain or whatever you call it for Facebook and Instagram. So
I know that Councilor Davis is wanting to address or ask a question as well, but I'm just going to say this about this program. This is the second year we've done this. I know last year it was wildly successful. I think it drove a lot of business into our community and our community businesses, which I have forever believed, even back on my Chamber of Commerce days, that our small businesses and whatnot are really the lifeblood of our community, and really do, they're the ones that support T-ball teams and soccer teams and donate to high school athletics and clubs and things like that. And so I think it's an important piece to circle back and really do spend our dollars here locally, right? We know the statistics of, there's a greater percentage of dollars staying locally when we shop and buy locally. So I'm really excited that we're bringing this back, and I hope it's even more successful than last year. So thank you both, and you, Tyler, for doing that. And I think congratulations are in order, are they not? Did you not have
Yes.
How could you forget that?
I mean, come on.
How long ago was it?
It was a couple months. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah,
All right, I was like,
yeah.
oh, I'm way off the mark. Councilman Davis, let's move on. I've already put my foot in my mouth. Okay.
You're live tonight, aren't you?
Jeez.
So Tyler,
It's all
great job on this. Are you tied in with the chamber too? Can they pick up cards at the chamber?
Absolutely, yes, yeah. And we also had that partnership last year and we're good partners with the Canby Area Chamber of Commerce. So we'll be sure to make sure that they have some cards and information as well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep,
Yeah, and you'll be briefing at the chamber luncheon.
yep, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep.
And the other, great job last night on the street trick or treat. Unbelievable.
Another wonderful year.
Yeah, I mean, we gave out a lot of candy.
How you kept it from raining, I don't know, but do it again, because
We need to keep that every year.
there were so many little
It
ones
was,
around
it was
last
a
night.
great event. Good job.
It kept them out of the neighborhoods though, I think, because we didn't have very many trick-or-treaters, and I saw a lot of folks saying
Oh,
the
yeah.
same thing.
No, I think they were all downtown.
They were, they went
Yeah.
downtown, got all their
You
candy.
saved me a
and
lot
went
of
home.
money at my house last night.
Good,
Yes.
glad to help.
Downtown Tofty Farm or on the north side of town in North Woods.
Yeah.
So, because
Yeah,
there's a
they
lot
went to
that goes
Northwoods
in.
because of the
I'm
pirates,
bummed
yeah.
out about that because I actually enjoy trick-or-treaters visiting my house.
Yeah, I only
so-
had a handful. They were
Yeah.
cute, but I didn't get very many.
We'll have a booth downtown for you next year.
Okay,
Yeah, maybe that's what we should do. We just go downtown and give our candy there.
well, there you go.
I like that idea.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
job.
Okay.
Next on our agenda is the opportunity for citizen input and community announcements. Opportunity to address the council on non-agenda items. I do not have any yellow cards here, and last I heard, there are no online comments, so we will move on to approval of the consent agenda, which is item 5.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda that includes the minutes of the September 6, 2023 work session and regular city council meeting.
Thank you.
Second?
I do have a question.
Motion's been made by Council President Hensley and seconded by Councilor Davis to approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the September 6, 2023 City Council work session and regular meeting. Council President Hensley, you have a question?
I do. It has no bearing on my vote. I'm going to vote to approve it. I was just wondering if we had an update on how we're progressing and getting the minutes caught up, since we're still in September.
There's no update right as of tonight.
Okay.
But we are working on getting them moved up. So now that CJ is on board, it's helping move up some of these things, so.
Okay, thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That carries 5-0. Next up is item 6, our ordinances. So ordinance number 1614, an ordinance authorizing the interim city administrator to execute a contract with Waterleaf Architecture Incorporated of Portland, Oregon, to provide architectural and engineering services to design and build the new Canby area transit facilities. And Eileen, an update on that, or I know this is the second reading.
Yes, there is no update. Todd is here if you have any questions for him, but there really is no update.
Nothing
It's
new.
just the second reading of the ordinance.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt ordinance number 1614, an ordinance authorizing the interim city administrator to execute a contract with Waterleaf Architecture Incorporated of Portland, Oregon, to provide architectural and engineering services to design and build new Canby area transit facilities.
A motion has been made by Council President Hensley and seconded by Councilor Maldonado to approve ordinance number 1614, an ordinance authorizing the interim city administrator to execute a contract with Waterleaf Architecture Incorporated of Portland, Oregon, to provide architectural and engineering services to design and build the new Canby area transit facilities. Roll call vote.
Counselor Patton?
Aye.
Counselor Maldonado?
Aye.
Counselor Davis?
Aye.
Counselor Stearns?
Aye.
Council President Hensley?
Aye.
That motion carries 5-0.
go forth and build Todd.
And we didn't even make you talk this time.
I mean, there's time, yeah.
No, I
No.
could.
I said he was available if you had questions, so.
Next on the agenda is old business, the city administrator and city attorney recruitment. I will say for that aspect, so we have finalized the city manager recruitment process and are now moving into interviews. So I'm just gonna bring this up later, but I will bring it up now. We are doing a community meet and greet of the 3 candidates on November 8th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Canby Police Department. Be an opportunity to meet the 3 candidates, shake hands, ask some very tough questions, and all the good things that will come with that. And then on the very next day, on November 9th, all 3 candidates will be put through the gauntlet of interviews by various panels and committees. And hopefully we'll have a decision after that piece of the process is done and move into contract negotiations. So I'm hopeful that we'll have a new city manager in place, hopefully the beginning of the new year. So that's the update on that.
For Christmas. Thank you, Santa.
Yep. The city attorney recruitment, again, I was gonna bring this up later, but I will bring it up now. We are moving through that process. One of the items that is an outstanding item that we need to talk about is a meeting with Judge Graff. He had some concerns and whatnot about court and things like that I think play into this conversation. So I believe Ms. Stein and I talked about the next meeting, trying to do a work session with Judge Graff at the beginning. So for the 6 to 7 hour to meet with him, to have that conversation and get his input and thoughts on the matter. Because I know there's conversation of, recruiting and having a full-time city attorney or contracting. And so this piece, I know will be beneficial for us to have. So
Okay.
that piece will be coming up regarding
So
that.
that'll be on November 15th.
November 15th.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And if there is anything that the council would like us to prepare in advance of that discussion, please let us know. We're in the process of developing the staff report to kind of frame that discussion. But if there is anything that the council would like to see as part of that discussion, let me know.
Okay.
I would just throw out there, I know there was talk about doing a cost analysis between contract and full-time. And you can put in whatever numbers you want, but one number that I would really like to see is what a full-time, if we take the full-time equivalent of the city attorney and we convert that into cost per hour for contract, including any other events that person might be attending, that be included, rather than just a comparison of what we have spent now compared to, what the salary of this person would be.
Right, and benefits and PERS as well.
Yeah.
As far as court goes, though, I know that the previous city attorney wasn't really involved in that much, so just want to know how much more staff time is involved with court with the absence of an on-board attorney. I'll think about something else. If I do, I will call you. I can't think of
Please
it
do.
now. I don't want to be here all night thinking about it.
Just one though analysis about how many hours the current situation is, how much is being used right now, so is it, I have no idea, is it, 20 hours a week, 10 hours a week?
Well, I do know, and Ms. Stein and I did have this conversation that, again, with being that we are in between this process and Mr. Doofman, thank you for being here this evening. I had my computer blocking you, but thank you for being here. That we have purposefully streamlined how much access to our contract attorney and firm we have had. So generally speaking,
a full-time onboard city attorney would probably get bombarded by all of us on the council. Whereas I think, we've been very conscientious about going through Eileen to make sure that if it's that important, that she streamlined the questions and thoughts that we have had, as well as directors of staff, so that she can be much more succinct in how she is reaching out to the law firm, because that can add up very quickly, especially when counselors like to talk, and I'm being one of those that ask a lot of questions and talk. So the numbers right now might be askew, we'll say. So
Yeah, I understand they probably will be, but it's just good to have some idea right now.
Sure.
Without any idea, I can say they're off by whatever percentage, but has no meaning without some sort of baseline. Also an idea of how much we'd rather, how much we're not using that we could use or should use, like I haven't made any decision
No,
yet.
I
but
got you.
I like input, I like data.
Yeah, data for sure. Yes, Councilor Patton.
Well, and I'll just point out too, some group that we have not mentioned is the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission also leans on the city attorney. And as the former chair of the Planning Commission, I would engage our city attorney every once in a while in preparation for meetings. And so that's another group or board that we need to consider, who normally has access to this individual.
Yeah, reach out to Matt.
Okay. Great. Thank you all. I appreciate that. Moving into mayor's business, Clackamas County Coordinating Committee will meet tomorrow evening, so I have nothing to report on that right now. The County Tolling Committee continues to meet, and we continue to go rounds and round with ODOT as well as the Oregon Transportation Commission on the tolling aspect and where that stands and what additional input they're seeking. Though it does seem like it is still moving forward, even with the current pause that's been put on it by the governor. So as I hear more, I'll continue to update the group on that. The Metro Mayors Consortium that I am a part of is preparing its legislative goals for the short session coming up. And one of the pieces to that is that I have been asked to be to move into the role of the chair for the MMC's Transportation Subcommittee. So, which will probably deal with more tolling and now the change in funding for some of the regional transportation projects that that ODOT is talking about not funding here in the future. So things like 99E, Highway 214 in Malala, all those things are going to be, could see a tremendous decrease in funding. So those are some of the things that are being worked on there. Let the community know again, we just did this evening, was a update on our comprehensive plan. There will be a community meeting on November 14th at 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. and that will be in the large conference room at the Canby Police Department. So if you want to be involved and provide input on how Canby is going to grow over the next 10, 15, 20 years, please show up. We want your input. The more input we get, the better we can make some decisions and move forward with that. So I appreciate any and all comers. On a personal note, many of you may recall that back in February, March, there was a piece with the Oregon Government Ethics Commission with myself and a number of the city councilors up here. And so I just wanted to give everybody an update on that. I know there's a couple other councilors that want to say words on this as well tonight. But just that the commission has completed their investigation of that complaint. And there has been, at least for me, I was offered a settlement that resulted in that having to attend a training on executive sessions and or as statutes for those types of meetings. So that's that resolution piece. The other option was to have a full-blown investigation into the matter, and
So I opted to settle with the ongoing training for the executive session. So I'm glad that that's been resolved and can move forward with that piece. So I just wanted to let the community know about that. Already talked a little bit with the council about some upcoming agenda items, one of those being with Judge Graff. And then the other one, we are going to do an urban renewal district meeting at our next meeting. It'll be after the city council meeting, so it'll be a little bit heartier city council meeting on the 15th. So just, I know that was an ask, and so we're gonna get that in there to do that. Friday, December 1st, I know I'm early, but it is Canby's Light the Night Parade and Christmas tree lighting. That'll be at 6 p.m. At Waite Park. So mark your calendars, bundle up, come down for that. It is always a well-attended event, rain or shine. So
Or melting sidewalks.
rain or shine, well, it's at night. So rain or no rain.
Rain or clouds or
Sure.
hot concrete.
Or freshly poured concrete.
Freshly poured streets. That was an
And
interesting
finally,
year.
I just want to comment, I know that Counselor Bangs has left for the evening, and I just want to address his comments. It's unfortunate that he's resigned. I know that Counselor Bangs and I have not always seen eye to eye on a number of things and have had our back and forth here on the dais every now and again. But it's always hard when we have any city councilor resign because it is it's a loss. It's a loss for the community, and it's a loss for this body to. It's just a loss. So I do understand where Councilor Bangs is at with all of it, with the workload and whatnot. This can be very time consuming, especially with many of us. We don't call it in. I think we benefit when we've got counselors that are being active in the community, attending their meetings and so forth. The more active we are, the better that we are as a council and as a community. So I do wish Chris all of the best, and I'm sure we will see him around. So Maya, maybe I'll connect with you tomorrow and we can talk about other closeout items for Councilor Bangs. So that's all that I have this evening. We're going to start with Councilor Patton for Councilor comments and liaison reports.
Thank you. So first, I just want to say how happy I am that I received an email that ODOT is slowly making progress on 9090. It's not been completely abandoned, so that is super awesome. That's not to say it's not going to explode and eat everybody's tires this winter, because they're not going to be paving it before then. But at least progress is being made so that hopefully next year the paving will get done and we'll see some good new work out there. I did attend the Clackamas City's dinner meeting. It took some time finding it. I did not do my due diligence as to where it was. It was in a golf course that was in the middle of an apartment complex. And so I went to 3 different places before actually arriving. But I did have a chance to meet with one of our legislators and tell him about 99E and the frustrations that we have about it. So I did my part to try and represent Canby, at least on that aspect of things. And it was very good. I always enjoy attending those meals. And now that volleyball is almost over, because I am a volleyball official by night, I'm starting to get back on track with all that stuff. And then secondly, as far as an update with the whole ethics thing, as before, I will be upfront and honest with everybody in the community about this. I too received a summary judgment to either take training on the matter that on how to not violate executive session law, or receive a letter of reprimand if it's not taken care of by the middle of May. And I did contact the person down at the Ethics Commission, or the investigator that was assigned to our case. And I just want to say that anytime I've contacted them, they have been extremely helpful and pleasant. It's not been adversarial at all. And they had informed me that they had not heard back yet from many of the members of council, so I did reach out to Eileen and the mayor to make sure that they were aware that there was some stuff waiting in their inbox, so no one would get caught off guard with anything. And then I did sign the summary judgment and send it back. And in chatting with our investigator, and this was also part of my conversation with Eileen and the mayor, is that the ethics board is happy to do group training. So instead of each individual having to do a training, they can tailor a training at no cost to the city and show up, and anybody who wants to participate in that training, whether they're part of the summary judgment or not, city staff, other organizations or boards within the city are welcome to attend that. And I think that would be a really great idea. And I think Eileen and the mayor have agreed on that. So I'm looking forward to, regardless of the outcome of the summary judgment, I think it's always good to have those sort of checkups and classes. So I'm looking forward to seeing that happen. If something is not done as a group, I will be taking care of it before the deadline for May to essentially expunge the whole thing. So with that was all I have.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Maldonado.
I have nothing at this time, sir.
Okay, sir, thank you. Council President Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Likewise, my liaison meetings are tomorrow and next week, so I don't have much of a liaison report, but I also did receive email and a letter in the mail from Oregon Government Ethics Commission office, and I did email Ms. Walker and apologize for my tardiness in replying. I got to her by the deadline, but it did say Friday, the 31st. So in my brain, I had Friday on the brain, not Tuesday. So I did get that back to her yesterday, and I'm going to mail off the originals as she requested. It found it interesting that it was just simply a letter in the parentheses that we were off by. The discussions that we had were okay under parent B, and we were parent I, or maybe it was the other way around or something. So it was just a simple little oops that in calling out the right ORS parentheses number. So having a little bit of update on what we're supposed to, which parent item we're supposed to call out would be helpful. So other than that, I mean, we can put it to bed finally. So. And then just a thank you to city staff and everyone and businesses and everyone who was involved in yesterday's event. The kiddos seemed to be really having a good time. In fact, I kind of had to skirt around town because there were so many of them, but I was happy to see them all out and about. So that's always a fun time. So thank you again for everyone who put that on. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I wanted to thank Chris Bangs for his service. He's done a great job for the city, and I just wanted to personally thank Chris for his time, because he's put an enormous amount of time and given a lot of time. And I fully respect him and how things have changed in his personal life, where he can spend more time trying to catch up with his family. So that's excellent. Parks and Rec, first of all, I wanted to thank Eileen for organizing a meeting that we had with COGEO upstairs. We had the planning department there. Don Hardy was there. Jamie Stickle was there. Jerry Nelzane, Jeff. We're all at that meeting with Patrick Sampson in looking at maps and various reports from Patrick as far as how he's progressing in regards to trying to find land for anywhere from 30 to 60 acres of land to build the athletic fields, making some progress. And I know that Eileen has kicked that up on the priority list for economic development to try to work with Patrick so that we don't have 6 or 7 different people working with Patrick, that we bring it back to the city as a priority so that we have one point of contact with Patrick on trying to find the land for the sports fields somewhere in Canby, or even in the expansion area. But we've got to try to do that because it's so critical to help our downtown businesses. When you look at a long-term fix, bringing in athletic fields and motels are going to help our downtown, our businesses anywhere in Canby are going to help our businesses if we can keep people in Canby. So we're continuing to make some progress on that, and I'll keep the council updated as we get other reports, because this is timing-wise could be next week or it could be 2 months from now. But I'll keep you updated as far as how we're doing with that in the discussions around that. And then the Dodds Farm public meeting, I believe, is the 8th or 9th. I tried to find it on my calendar.
It's the 9th in the
9th.
evening.
In the evening. So if you're listening, we're going to have a public meeting here.
I think it's 6 o'clock.
Pardon me, 6
I
o'clock.
think it's 6 o'clock
Yeah,
here
6 o'clock, and
the
we'll have,
9th?
on the 9th.
yeah, we'll
Where
have,
here?
yeah,
In the,
6.
What, I'm just wondering what room, because we're interviewing and
It's upstairs,
it's,
yeah.
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 I don't recall which.
But
room.
Upstairs,
anyway,
okay.
yeah, we will advertise that as far as the location for that meeting.
Mhm.
Okay.
So that's going to be happening on Dodds Farm, receiving comments from the public on that as well. Parks Committee is hard at work, and we're actually having quite a few people start showing up for comment. So let's see, in regards to the one question I had for council as well is, I think we need to land the plane on the ARPA funding because I know we've made some commitments to a lot of different organizations out there, including the Adult Center, $500,000 to the Adult Center and to the fire district, as well as Canby Utility. And I think it's important for us to follow through on what, we've made commitments on. And so I don't know what the hang up is on that, but we should get together and resolve that. I know after our financial report from Eric, there was some discussion around, are we still going to proceed with allocating that money to those organizations? Well, they're counting on it. We kind of made a commitment to them. And so I think we need to figure out if we're going to do that. If we are, then we need to pay those bills.
I considered the plane landed.
I did too.
I want it deboarded
Yeah,
2 weeks ago.
okay.
Bags off.
Council President Hensley.
Thank you. I agree, we need to land the plane, as Councilor Davis says. I think that it got rerouted a little bit when we got the financial report a few weeks ago. So while I do agree, though, I wish I'd had the information before we made the allocations and the promises, because we might have made different choices, but we can't renege on that now. That doesn't make us good community partners. So I think we need to go ahead with those commitments. But I would like to have a discussion on the allocations within the city to see if we can rework some of those to just backfill what we've already spent or something, because we need to fix the financial problems that we've come across.
And that's the work that's happening. I never intended at all for us to renege on the commitments that were made to the community agencies. It's a matter of just reprioritizing the money that that is being spent internally to the city. So,
Okay.
So they'll be saying checks soon, or how does that work? What does that look like?
we're in the process of paying what has been, I know that there was a question about what goes to the fire district and the police department in terms of the C-800 payment. So that should be in process. The other commitments are just funding encumbrances right now, so. Yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful,
Okay.
Eileen. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Stearns.
Yeah, push the button first.
There you go. Push mine off now.
First, I'd like to thank Councilor Bangs for his service. I haven't been on the council long with him, and I'm sure we would have agreed on some things and disagreed on other things, but I really appreciate having people who disagree with me, because otherwise it gets boring if I just people agree with me. Well, as far as the transit committee goes, we have somebody else to appoint to the transit committee. Probably won't be taken care of till next meeting, just because I think we got the approval after the agenda came out. for this meeting. So we're excited about having the transit committee full. And a couple personal notes. One is if you guys are all doing training, I want to see if I can at least tag along on one of your meetings or having it as a group, because I always like to learn from other people's mistakes rather than my own. If that's the case, I don't know how bad it was. I wasn't there, but it's always good to learn beforehand what to avoid. So at least if you're breaking the rules, at least you know you're breaking the rules when you do it. It just don't want to. So do that. And the other thing is talking a little bit with the bridging cultures out there beforehand. I'm going to try to get involved with that a little bit more besides just serving food or doing that sort of level. But one of the things I want to talk about a little bit that for some in the future, I think it might be very useful for the council and for the community, is to maybe have a work session sometime where we invite members of not just the Hispanic community, but maybe even like an immigration attorney or something to explain a little bit about the challenges that are faced. I do know a lot about it, but in a way that makes me more dangerous than useful for any specific advice. But I have been involved a lot with legal processes, and I do know a lot about at least the legal process as it comes to taxation. I've actually given national seminars on that. But I think it's very useful because a lot of misinformation about that out there. And if they're a big part of our community, it's just good at least to understand some of the challenges that are faced there, and so that we can relate. And then the other side of it would be to let the people, those communities a lot of times are kind of shy to come to a city council or approach a city government on their own. And I want to be able to open up a process to where maybe members of the community might be able to feel a little bit more comfortable involving, because there's just that barrier sometimes. And I don't think we'll eliminate the barrier, but at least we can make it smaller or break it down.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
We will add that to the list for session topics.
Okay. Next item on the list is interim city administrator business and staff reports.
So council, I have a couple of items to mention. First is Highway 99E. So this week we realized that Highway 99E, as you know, has started. The work has started. We have a noise variance that has expired. And so that noise variance needs to be reapproved. We've got a game plan for how it will be reapproved. So far, the work's happening during the day. There will be a little bit of work that can be done between. So we have determined that December 6th is the deadline that we can get the variance before the council, because there has to be a public hearing. Before December 6th, there might be a little bit of nighttime work, but it will be within the decibel limit. So we will allow ODOT to go ahead and do that work. But all the jackhammering and all of that kind of stuff that needs the noise variance, that will be approved on December 6th, or given to the council for its consideration. And then we will have a new noise variance permit, and we can continue on with that project. So that's the.
We're supposed to be done with the project by now, right? That's why it expired.
That's why it expired.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to comment on is that I have been working with, speaking of ARPA dollars and the commitment to the community. Last week I spent quite a bit of time, especially on Friday, working with Kathy on a BRIC grant, which is Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant. So the city has to be the applicant for the grant, but Kathy did incredible in terms of pulling together the grant application. So it was a real good partnership. So all the more reason why, we will continue to fund, that I would recommend that we continue to fund the adult center with ARPA dollars.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's it.
Okay. Councilor Patton.
a follow-up on that grant for the adult center, and this is something that pops into my head from years ago discussion. As we know, the adult center is built on land that is not owned by the city. It was built with community block grants. And back in the day, there was a discussion about if we needed to abandon the building and do something else because the school wants that land back, that essentially, if we did not, and correct me if I'm wrong, if we didn't build another facility, the city would have to pay back all of those original block grants. So with this additional grant money, I'm just curious as to what the stipulations are as far as if there's grant money given to that. Like, is that something where if something happens to that building, it has to get paid back, or just something to think about, knowing what's happened in the past so that people might not be caught off guard for the future? If that makes sense? It's complicated.
You mean the repayment of the brick grant, the
Yeah.
new grant?
I'm sure no one even thinks about that.
Right.
But knowing that about the community block grant thing and how that really was a factor in our decision-making about what to do with that building like a decade ago, it might be something good to just look into the fine print.
We will, certainly look at it. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that this is not, it's a pre-application for a grant. So we still have to be invited to submit the grant.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're just thinking ahead, Jason, to, are there stipulations within the grant if building has to come down for whatever reason?
Yeah, if it's like, if it's moved somewhere else, that's great. There's still a building for the similar purpose. Because I think that's kind of what was decided back in the day, was if we had to abandon that building and as long as we built another building for the purpose of the adult center, those block grants didn't have to be paid back. But if we just said we're out of the adult center business, then all of that money would have to get paid back to wherever those grants came from.
And if I remember correctly, and this is foggy, but if we had to turn over the building to the school district, if they repurposed it in some way that met the requirements of the block grant, we did not have to pay those back.
Yeah, that sounds right too.
So let's hope that we don't have that problem, but.
Yeah, I don't think we will, but it's just
'Cause by
something,
now, I
that
mean-
was something that I'm sure back in the day, those people that accepted those block grants to build that building never thought about. And with this grant or any additional grant money, I think that's something to just be cognizant of, that we understand what the stipulations are of that aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I can't ever see the Canby community going away from some
Yeah.
kind of an adult center, ever.
Yeah.
But it's good to know.
It may not be that building in that place, but yeah.
And Ms. Stein, do you have anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Next opportunity for citizen input. Seeing no one rushing the microphone, we'll go into action review.
You have approved the consent agenda and adopted ordinance number 1614.
Wonderful. Perfect. I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Here,
Motion
sit down.
carries 5-0. Canby, good night. We will see you on November 15th.
Yes.
Yes, I think about it. Thank you. Good night, Canby.